Hello, I'm George of Pavliscak Studios. I'll be making a glass marble today out of glass rods. I just have to turn on some more equipment. I'm using a propane oxygen torch, and I just changed my tanks, so the oxygen may be a little bit wiggly at first. I've got a magnifying glass here to show you some up close stuff. All right, so I'm going to make a glass marble. It's going to be a flower marble, so it's going to be mostly clear. Some color will bloom from little dots out into petals, and then I'm going to take that flower and make a second half of the marble that's basically just going to be water with some little tiny fish murinis in there. And let me see if I can show you one. I have them pre-made and cut into pieces. They are very small. They will look bigger once they're in the marble. Wow, hard to see. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to put a few of them aside. And I always put out just a few extra, because when you're doing these and you are heating them and putting them into your marble, sometimes they break, sometimes they explode, sometimes they get lost because they're small and they fly away. And so I put out a few extras just in case disaster strikes. When you make the murini, you make the fish shape, and you have to make it envisioning it in cross section. And then once it's cased, like, oh, here's a bigger one. So once it's fish shaped and cased in clear, then it gets pulled out into a long thread like this, but thinner. And then you cut little sections of it, and each little section is a fish. And so usually there's like messy stuff at the end from where you built it, and the middle portion has the nice looking bits that you want to use. Hopefully, if you spend a lot of time sculpting the middle, you get quite a few uses out of that. Let's get the torch started, and I have some special eyewear that I wear to filter out sodium flare and protect my eyes from ultraviolet radiation that comes off of the glass as it gets superheated. So I have a spark lighter for lighting my propane. I light my propane first, and then I turn on the oxygen. Sometimes there's a loud noise. Don't be alarmed. Unless the whole camera goes blank and you never hear from me again, and then go ahead and be alarmed. All right. I'm going to clean my torch a little bit. I was making many little tiny marbles out of scrap for a few hours yesterday, and those look like this. Little tiny marbles, and those get used, remelted onto the surface of glass for kaleidoscopes and earrings, and also glass blanks that I then will pick up in my furnace and roll into larger marbles. And you'll see that this fall. When I get my furnace up and running, I can't get the right kind of glass for it currently, but by this fall I should be able to. All right, so getting started on the marble, I'm going to start with a large diameter glass rod. You can't just put glass right in the torch because glass is an insulator, and so it resists coming up to temperature initially. So each time I wave it in front of this torch, which ranges from 1500 to 3600 degrees, depending on how near you are the face of the torch, it raises the temperature of the tip of this a little bit. Since this is a cut end, when it starts melting, there's going to be some impurities in the glass. So you'll see me go in with a tweezer and nip off little bits that look foamy, basically. This will take a few minutes to get up to temperature. The beginning portion of the construction is going to be basically melting the end of this rod so that a ball forms on it. Once that ball gets to be close to twice the diameter of the rod itself, I'm going to flatten it on a graphite marvering plate that I have just to this side of me. And I'm going to use a paddle to actually make that squished part flatter. It's going to be a giant disc. Glass blowers sometimes refer to that as a Maria. And I used to know the origin of that, but I can't recall it currently. But on that disc, I'm going to draw my flower two-dimensionally, and then I'm going to turn that disc inside out by holding this up at an angle and letting the disc slump. I'm going to keep this going first. If I start talking, this rod will never get melted. So melting the edge of the rods will make it cup-shaped, and then I'll push it flat again. And each time you cup it and push, you're taking glass from the outside and bringing it up into the center. And that takes that two-dimensional drawing that you've made of the glass, of the flower, the nascent flower, and starts pulling it up into the center of the rod and pushing it with clear glass from underneath. On this particular marble, I make a lot of simple flowers that way, augmenting them by poking them or adding different colors to that initial two-dimensional drawing. In this one, I'm going to build my flower as I normally would, and then when I'm done, I'm going to make a lily pad on it, which is going to demark sort of the equator of the marble. Then I'm going to make an aqua clear second hemisphere of the marble underneath that flower that I've made, and put some of those fish swimming around in the blue water. And it'll look like a water lily with fish swimming underneath it, I hope. And if you watched the pre-show, then there were 3 examples of that. You saw one from above, where it was just the flower, and one from below, where it was just the fish, and then one from the side where you could see both. So now this rod has started to melt. You can see it's orange, so it's hot. And I'm going to get a little bit bigger. To get the rod to gather onto itself, if you tilt it back and you're rotating it, the ball is ever so slowly falling back onto the rod and gathering upon itself. When I start turning that disc that I've drawn the flower on inside out, I'm going to switch my angle. So I'm using gravity to help me, along with the surface tension of the glass and the constant turning to keep whatever I'm melting even. If I don't turn it, it wants to fall down. And you can flip it, but that's going to be sort of ham-fisted. The turning I'm doing also is not just random turning. I am turning it in concert with the heat that I put into it and the movement of the gather. I'm also coordinating that with the angle that I'm adjusting as I go. I mentioned I was going to clean up the surface of the glass. I already did that, and the surface of this glass is now looking quite nice, except for a few bubbles, most of which I think will be inconsequential. When you have the glass and it's just orange hot like that, you can really see all of your tiny imperfections. And some of them you can overlook. And so the ones I'm seeing here are very tiny. And I think going in with a tweezers to pull them out, I may do just as much harm as good. And I always want to be improving my marble rather than detracting from the design I've already done. Now this gather is big, and I'm going to flatten it out. I'm going to squish it into as wide a disc as I can, so I have a lot of room to draw my two-dimensional flower. Using my graphite marvering pad, and on the top where it's squishing out with the edge, pushed downwards and made a very, not a very large, but a larger flat disc. Now I can start drawing my flower two-dimensionally. What I'm going to do is start in the center with the stamen. I'm going to put 5 little yellow stamen. Now I'm going to take pink, because I want this to be a pink water lily. I'm going to draw several concentric circles of petals. I'm going to turn down the torch because I'm just melting this tiny thread that I pulled in advance of the color that I want the flower to be. So let's add some little petals in a circle around my initial stamen. And let's add another row. And I don't want the rows to be perfect, because flowers aren't perfect and nature is not perfect. I want it to be have an element of chaos. Here's my next concentric circle of petals. Let's do one more. I'm going to turn the torch up and heat my disc a little bit. If I let any portion of the glass that I'm working on get too cool, it will crack. Turn my torch flame down to a point again, and let's add the last concentric row of petals. Now that they're all applied, I'm going to melt them into the surface, and then I'm going to superheat a few at a time and poke them in slightly to give them a pointy petal when they're finished turning inside out. So, first, a gentle melting of the surface of the disc while heating the whole marble. And you can see they're starting to pull into the surface. Let's finish the job. Then I'm going to, while they're hot, I'm going to go in and poke a few of those petals in, however many I have time for before it solidifies. Let's see if we can find some of those. Oh, yes, you can see where I've poked in some of them, making them look a little bit more like paramecium, with a dividing line in the center, but it's actually just an indentation. We heat up a little area, get a few pokes in before the glass firms up, and then because I don't want the whole thing to get cold or have any areas where it's going to start to crack, I'm heating the whole disc. Now I'll go back and complete my poking of the pointed part of the petal that I want to rise up to the surface when I start to turn this disc inside out. There, now I've poked in all of the petals. Now I'm going to melt them more completely into the surface while heating the edge of the disc. And I've started angling it down because I want it to do its first cup shaping. When it starts to cup, maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to flatten it back out. When I do that, as it starts to turn it inside out, that whole drawing that I just did two-dimensionally is going to shrink on the disc's surface. After I shrink that design a few times, I'm going to have room to draw my next layer of petals on there, and I'm going to do the green petioles which surround the flower. So usually I shrink this about 3 times. So I have a new phone that you can in the background. And it's loud. I will be turning that off. Alright, so I've cupped and pushed this a few times, and you can see the whole design is a little bit smaller. I'm going to do it one more time, and then I'm going to go around with a green and make the same little slug shapes on there. And I don't want those to be pointy, I don't think. Well, let me think about that. So you can see it's cupping. I'm going to flatten it. If you look at it on the edge, you can see the petals are starting, especially the parts where I just poked the tip of the petal up. You can see the tips of the petals starting to bloom up into the disc, to the volume of the disc. All right, so I'm going to take a dark green thread and do a line of petioles around the flower. And then melt those in. You can see there on the surface, the petals of the flower are actually already up into the disc, because I started turning the disc surface inside out. Now I'm going to get the whole thing turning inside out, cupping and pushing it. It'll probably take about 8 or 10 times. As I cup and push it, I'm going to let it start coming to be more spherical, because I want that design that I'm shrinking on the surface to come down to a point. It won't come exactly down to a point, because after so many applications of flame and cooling and pressing and reheating, that glass is going to start to get pretty oxidized and devitrified and get a little bit foggy, and it won't want to contract after a certain period of time. Especially because I'm really trying to move this along pretty quickly. There you can see the flower is blooming into the disc. The time, because I'm explaining it, the timing's a little bit off of the way I would normally do it. Faster at some points and slower at others, because I'm trying to keep things moving. But then when I show you things, which are very fun to look at, that slows it down, because it's cooling it a little bit more than I normally would let it cool. But look at that. It's really shrinking now. You can see the color difference between the petals and the petioles and the stamen. Got a little crooked while I was showing it to you. There, now we straightened it out. Corrected it. Now, sit up straight for a second. At an angle there. If I'm doing a lot of these flowers, sometimes I'll switch which hand I'm using. But then the urge to reach across to show you is dangerous, so it's better if I do it on this side. Because you don't want to reach across the torch, it only takes a split second, because this is so hot that you will get the worst burn ever. Now this flower is really blooming. And you can see the petals are pointy. You can start to anyway. Now, once I have this design on the end shrunk down pretty small. It doesn't have to be to a point. It's going to get to be the size of a messy looking little disc, and that's fine because that gives you somewhere to decorate or to sign your name or to build the next phase of your design. So got to work with the glass and find your place to innovate and then push those boundaries. So you go to a point, you get comfortable going up to that point, and then you do stuff on the other side of that point. And then once you get comfortable on either side of that, then you can start moving that back and forth. And that's where new techniques and new designs and new applications can really pop out and show themselves to you, or you can make the glass do what you want and things that you never thought before possible. There's the flower. Basically complete. And then you can see it's really shrunk down. Looks pretty good. Alright, now I want to put a big lily pad underneath it. And it really doesn't have to be big, but it is going to end up being sort of bisecting the top and the bottom of this marble, with the flower being on top of the surface of the water, the lily pad being the surface of the water, and underneath being the aqua transparent glass. So I'm going to get a big green gather, very hot. I'm going to plop it down right in the middle of that, and then I'm going to heat it way up. There's the light green gather. I'm going to heat it way up, and then I'm going to squish it. Well, it's super hot. And give it a little bit of a wiggle so I can cover the whole surface of the disc. Now you can see it almost looks like it's sitting on the green lily pad already. Now let's make the water. The water can be the whole half of the marble, or it could just be a little bit of the marble, maybe a third. And what's going to happen is, since I don't have a large diameter aqua glass, transparent glass, there's a couple ways I can do this. I can do it by getting big gathers, applying them to the middle of that disc and squishing them flat, or I can inject the rod into the gather. That's a slower method, but it's cleaner. You're not adding surfaces to other surfaces, where every time you put a surface on another surface, you're adding the possibility of trapping air, trapping debris, trapping slight oxidations, which are going to reflect the light. So if I was wanting to inject this, what I would do is I'd have the rod attached. I would control my heat a little bit more and heat the juncture of the rod where it meets, where it has entered the marble, and then I will just push the rod in without hopefully affecting the design. And you can see I'm starting to add volume to the marble. Let's do a little bit more. And there, you see I've added even more volume to the marble. Let's take that off. And let's round it up. Let's see, we didn't get a lot of aqua glass on there, but that's alright. This will be a shallow pool. One of the things about injecting like that is that you can mess up the rest of your design if you go too fast. And I was going a little bit too fast, and I can see that my lily pad surface was starting to get bumped out into the flowers section of the marble, which I would rather not have that, because you want the lily pad to be flat. They're flat, generally with curled up edges. And if you get the lily pad to cover the whole disc that bisects the dividing line between the two, then you can have those edges curl up. But having it just be there and have water, the aqua glass around the outside, is also nice. You can do it either way. I'm using my hemispheric graphite mold now to just improve the spherical shape of this marble. And there you can see the flower, the lily pad, and the blue water. Now let's put a couple fish in that water. See how nice the water looks from underneath? Alright, so I'm going to pick up one of my little fish, greenies, and I'm going to heat it. I have to grab it just right, because I don't want to adhere the tweezers to the surface of the glass. I'm going to adhere the glass to the glass. Then, before it starts to melt and pull itself out of shape, I want to melt it and press it flat. And you can see I started to do that. Pressing the fish in to the surface of the marble. And it's sort of a finesse. Melt it a little bit, press it in, until the surface, the top surface of the Mirini merges with the surface of the marble itself. And we did it. And there it is. You can still see the little bit of a line there, but it's not going to move around. It's pretty flat, absorbed within the surface. Let's put another fish on there. Let's do a bigger one. And didn't grab it right. There we go. Do it on the other side. Oh, I broke it. Cracked right in half. I didn't flash it. Oh, that one broke too. Alright, I got a little one. Little one went on there. Oops, my marble came loose. Alright, so I let it get too cold at the junction. I have to pick it up. I'm going to quickly heat up a clear rod and grab the marble and heat the surface back up. It's cracking a lot right now because I let it get too cold. So let's get some heat back in there, and then I will figure out what I want to do with the handle. And I got to try to save that little fishy too. So crazy. I'm going to get in there and do all of these things at once. I'm heating my marble, pressing my fish. Hello.
Hi.
You going out for a motorcycle ride?
Yes, I am, if that's okay, if you don't mind me opening the garage door while you're doing your thing.
Nope, that's fine. Just,
What are you making?
this is a floating flower with fish underwater.
I've never seen you do that before. Ever. That's brilliant. Where'd you think of that?
I did this, I think back in 2008 the first time. I did some water lilies with lily pads, separating the water and the
How cool is is that?
And the air.
Uh-huh.
And then this one, I got too involved putting my fish on, and the rod cracked and it got it. So.
Oh.
But I think we'll save it.
You know what it looked like when I walked out? It looked like a terrarium. It looked like a vase terrarium that had a plant in the top part of the tray. It looked like that throat was part of a vase.
Like an Erlenmeyer flask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when I was thinking about what marble to do today, I was looking at that aquarium marble that I made for the boys back when they were little, with the fishies' names written under it, and the bubbles and stuff. Because I wanted to do a little Nervini, since I'd posted some, I'd made like 1,000 different colored leaves for doing earrings. You know, cross section like these little fishies. I broke those.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. What color is the plant?
It's supposed to be light pink, but it looks darker. I think.
It's hot, so I can't tell what color it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it doesn't stay darker, but it should be this pink here.
I don't know. I think it's looking a little lavenderish at this point. If it stayed this color, I'd call it lavender.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to stay that way. I mean, sometimes colors will change. That pink I've already reworked, and that is a pink that I mixed myself. So it's pretty stable. And a lot of times if I mix color, and Barb left, so I'm talking to you again now. If I'm mixing color, one of the ways to stabilize your colors for the Italian lead crystal glass is to mix it with white, which is the most neutral opaquing agent. Okay, thank you. Garage door. A thumbnail. All right. So, as I was talking, I took that cracked part of the rod off and removed the clear glass that was going to interfere with my design. And I think everything got put back finally to where it was. And there was also, I have, for visual purposes, the cement board that all this surrounding fume hood is that I'm working in is painted. So anytime a marble hits the surface, it hits that paint, and the paint gets chemicals on the surface of the glass. You can see exactly where you need to remove. And that was by accident, because having everything be white just helps me see, because the gray of the cement board was difficult to see if I had set down things, especially clear things. So helpful, but annoying if you drop your marble, which still happens. Let's see, how long have I been making marbles? 4, so 26 years. I still drop marbles. So I guess I'm just not very good at marble making. All right. Whew. Shape is good. There you can see our water lily flower, yellow stamen. So the lily pad is stand, go underneath, and fish. So now that the sphere is corrected, I used my marble mold. I went into a hemisphere that was bigger than the diameter of the marble that I was making, and used light pressure and rotation to get it closer to a spherical surface. Then I went to a smaller hemisphere on my marble paddle, using just the rim of the mold. And as I rotate it, I change the axis of rotation, and that sphere interacting with that circle of a smaller diameter actually forces it into a sphere shape. It assists in the helping of it become a sphere. Right, so right now I'm just heating the whole marble and the surface. That surface tension is pulling it a little bit smoother, because when I use the graphite, a lot of times you get surface ripples, so you see the reflection jumping a little bit, especially on the water area. But on the clear area, the reflection is very stable because the marble is smooth. So now I'm going to chill the surface of the marble and give one last improvement to the sphericalness of it by going into a cherry wood paddle that's soaked in water. I'm going to get that. That's what I'm getting up. Here is my paddle. Cherry wood. It's got holes drilled into it. So I'm just using the rim of this mold. And I use each rim just for a few seconds. I'll put it back in the water. And yes, water gets everywhere. It's very good, creative process. Yes. But I'm working on a smooth concrete surface because hot glass falls on the ground, and so you would not be wanting to work in a building that had a wood floor, because that would be one mistake and the building burns down. So I have actually quite a lot of precautions in place here. Cement floor, cement board fume hood with overhead fans and vents to the outside. This thing is all specially wired with lights and fans, etc. The surface that my torch is actually sitting on is a metal surface. I've got various marvering plates to my left, graphite being the one that I like for most of my work because it pulls heat out of the glass a little bit faster than a steel marver, which I do have. My next one over is a steel marver plate. Marver, just any flat surface that's going to resist the heat of the glass that you can use to roll or flatten or push against. So when I'm glass blowing and making bigger marbles, a lot of times I'm working on the steel marble plate rather than the graphite, because I'm doing some kind of like a bigger scale of work. Not always. I sometimes will bring those tiny elements into the bigger glass blowing. So I ran the marble through the molds a couple times just because the water side was not quite spherical yet. So now it is. Improved it a lot. And now I'm going to do the same thing I did on the first side, where I'm going to heat it, let the surface tension of the glass pull the surface smooth, but I'm going to keep the rotation going and keep a lot of heat in there. And then I'm not 100% happy with the sphericalness, so I'm probably going to hit the graphite molds one more time. So quickly in the larger diameter, and then for a few seconds in the smaller diameter, spinning quickly and changing the axis. And that has done it. I am spherical. See the water going in. Water. And because I haven't done one of these in a while, the base of the water lily, where I would have liked it to come to a more constrained point where it joins the lily pad, It's not looking great. But every marble is good practice for your next marble. Just like any project. The painting may come out great, may suck. In both cases, it's still great practice for your next painting. You never want to do your best work ever. You want your best work ever to be somewhere down the line. This is a stepping stone on the path to your best work. To practice, yeah. I'm just going to practice for another 10 years and then I'm going to really do art. Till then, I'm just practicing. I've been saying that to myself for a long time. But I like the process. I find it very relaxing once I'm melting stuff. This is my favorite part. Alright, so I'm done. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my jacks. In this case, for tiny torch working, I'm using a scissor. I'm going to chill the juncture between my last attachment rod, which is almost a cold joint, and the marble. I'm going to do it over in a fiberboard. So chilling that mark, tap it off. I'm going to pick up my torch. I want to clean any loose debris off there first. Turn the flame down a little bit. Then I'm going to superheat that last point for like 5 or 6 seconds. Then I'm going to let it calm down. Then hit it again for 5 or 6 seconds. Let it calm down. And then one last time. And it's really drawing together now. The surface is very hot. I can see that orange where all the impurities and all the imperfections show up, and there weren't any, so I'm very happy. I'm going to get a bent piece of wire that I'm going to call a marble tweezer, and I'm going to heat this metal up until it's orange hot. Then just let it go to black, and that's the right temperature for picking up my marble. And then I'm going to transfer this flour into my annealing oven, where it'll sit at 960 degrees for a couple hours. I'll be right back. So when I was initially thinking of this marble earlier today, and for this demonstration, and what I forgot was that I had some UV glass, and I was going to put a little UV jellyfish in the water before I put the fish on. So then not only would you have the flour on top and underneath the water and the fish, but then if you turned a black light on it, you'd see the little jellyfish in the middle of the two other fish. So I will do some of those. No, I won't. Maybe I will. That's none of your business. All right. Well, thanks for watching. And you can check out more of these demos on YouTube. And for really old ones, you can go to Patreon. And I should be back, not next Wednesday, but the following Wednesday with another marble. And I'm thinking Monster Eye, or something with gold and silver leaf. But you can always give me a message on the Facebook group. If there's a marble you haven't seen me make in a while, I would be glad to tackle it and even put a new twist on it. All right, have a great night. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.